The earliest handshake ever recorded was between two kings in ancient Assyria, their hands clasped in a moment that sealed more than a treaty. It sealed trust. As you settle, let this quiet curiosity settle with you too. How did a simple touch become a language of trust across centuries? We'll follow the thread from ancient stone to modern biology, asking how a gesture so small can carry so much meaning. Right now, as you settle, imagine the quiet pulse of oxytocin, the hormone that turns touch into trust. This is the story of how we shake hands and why it still matters. The light is softening now, isn't it? A slow settling of the afternoon, the long shadows stretching across the polished floor. Here, in this hall, a grand space in, perhaps, Vienna, or maybe a smaller court in Dresden. The air still holds a trace of beeswax and old wood, the scent of treaties signed and futures tentatively agreed upon. It's a room built for ceremony, for the careful weighing of words, for the gestures that carry as much weight as the pronouncements themselves. And it's in this room, amongst the diplomats and the powdered wigs, that we find the familiar greeting, the handshake. It's a small thing, isn't it? A momentary clasp of hands, a brief pressure exchanged. Something we do without thinking, a reflex woven into the fabric of social interaction. You've offered one countless times, received it just as often. A punctuation mark at the beginning or end of a conversation, a sign of respect, agreement, or simply acknowledgement. But consider for a moment the sheer strangeness of it. We grasp another person's appendage, a limb so intimately connected to their very being, and press it against our own. It's a vulnerability, a small offering of trust, a silent declaration that, at least for this brief instant, we mean no harm. The custom, as these things often do, is widespread. Across continents, across cultures, a variation of this gesture appears, a testament to a shared human need for connection and reassurance. But the particulars, the firmness of the grip, the number of pumps, the accompanying eye contact, these are all subtly different, coded messages understood within specific communities. It's a language spoken without words, a delicate dance of social cues. And it began perhaps not with etiquette or diplomacy, but with something far more fundamental, the need to show empty hands. The earliest known depictions of something resembling a handshake date back to ancient Assyria, around the 9th century BC. And relief shows the king Shalmaneser III clasping the hand of Marduk-Zakir-Shumi-Thus, the Babylonian king, a gesture meant to seal an alliance, a visual promise of mutual commitment. It wasn't a friendly greeting, not in the way we understand it now. It was a demonstration, a reassurance that neither king concealed a weapon, that the meeting was conducted in good faith. Imagine the weight of that gesture then, the very act of showing your open palm, a statement of intent, a defiance of potential hostility. The hand, of course, is a remarkable instrument. Not just for grasping and building, but for sensing, for communicating. The skin of your palm is covered in a network of nerve endings, each one a tiny sentinel relaying information about pressure, temperature, texture. When you shake another person's hand, you're not just feeling the physical contact, you're receiving a flood of subtle cues, the warmth of their skin, the moisture of their grip, the calluses that speak to a life of labor, the tremor that hints at nervousness or excitement. All of this information, processed unconsciously, contributes to your overall impression of the other person, a silent assessment of their trustworthiness and intent. And it's not just the hand itself, but the entire arm, the shoulder, the subtle shift in posture that accompanies the gesture. The muscles tense and relax, a complex choreography of signals sent and received. The brain, constantly scanning for threats and opportunities, interprets these signals, building a picture of the other person's emotional state. A firm, confident handshake, accompanied by direct eye contact, is often perceived as a sign of strength and sincerity. A weak, hesitant grip, averted gaze, can raise doubts, trigger a subconscious alarm. But how did this simple gesture evolve from a demonstration of peaceful intent to a ubiquitous social custom? It's a question that takes us back perhaps to the very origins of human society, to a time when trust was a rare and precious commodity. In a world without laws or institutions, survival depended on your ability to assess the character of those around you, to distinguish friend from foe. A handshake, a physical act of vulnerability, may have served as a way to signal trustworthiness, to demonstrate a willingness to engage in cooperative behavior. Consider the mechanics of it, the way the bones align, the way the muscles contract and release. The radius and ulna, the two long bones of your forearm, rotate as you extend your hand, allowing you to offer a full range of motion. The carpal bones, a cluster of 8 small bones in your wrist, provide flexibility and support. The metacarpals, the bones in your palm, form a stable base for grasping. And then there are the ligaments and tendons, the tough fibrous tissues that connect bone to bone and muscle to bone, allowing for precise control and coordination. It's a remarkable feat of engineering, a testament to the power of natural selection. And the skin, that intricate layer of protection and sensation. It's not just a passive barrier, but an active participant in the process of communication. The sweat glands release tiny droplets of moisture, leaving a subtle chemical signature that can be detected by the other person. The sebaceous glands produce oils that lubricate the skin, making it softer and more pliable. The melanin produces pigment that protects against the harmful effects of ultraviolet radiation. And the nerve endings, those tiny sentinels, relay information about pressure, temperature, and texture, providing a constant stream of feedback to the brain. The pressure you apply during a handshake isn't uniform either. It varies depending on the size and strength of your hands, the angle of your grip, and the amount of force you exert. And it's this variation, this subtle difference in pressure, that can convey so much information. A firm grip, for example, is often associated with dominance and confidence, while a lighter grip can be perceived as a sign of submissiveness or insecurity. The brain, constantly analyzing these subtle cues, builds a picture of the other person's personality and intentions. This isn't just about physical contact, though. It's about the entire context of the interaction, the setting, the occasion, the relationship between the two people involved. A handshake exchanged after a successful business negotiation carries a different weight than one offered as a friendly greeting. A handshake between two rivals carries a different weight than one between two close friends. The brain takes all of these factors into account, interpreting the gesture within the broader context of the situation. It's fascinating to consider the origins of this custom, the way it may have evolved from a simple demonstration of peaceful intent to a complex social ritual. There's a theory, for example, that the handshake originated as a symbolic gesture of mutual commitment, a way to seal an oath or promise. The two hands clasping each other represented the binding of two individuals, a pledge of loyalty and cooperation. The up and down movement of the grasped hands may have been a way to emphasize the seriousness of the commitment, a visual affirmation of the bond. In Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, the handshake is often used as a subtle indicator of social status and romantic interest. Mr. Darcy's initial reluctance to shake hands with Elizabeth Bennet, for example, is interpreted as a sign of his arrogance and disdain. Later, when he finally does offer his hand, it's a moment of significant emotional weight, a symbol of his growing affection. Austen, with her keen eye for social nuance, understood the power of this simple gesture, the way it could convey so much information without a single word being spoken. But beyond the social cues and the symbolic gestures, there's a deeper biological process at play, a complex interplay of hormones and neural pathways that underlies our capacity for trust and social bonding. When you shake another person's hand, you're not just exchanging a greeting, you're activating a network of brain regions associated with empathy, compassion, and social connection. And this activation, this surge of neurochemicals, can have a profound effect on your overall emotional state, fostering a sense of warmth, trust, and mutual understanding. The very act of physical touch, it seems, can release a cascade of hormones that promote bonding and cooperation. These hormones, including oxytocin, dopamine, and serotonin, act on the brain's reward system, creating a feeling of pleasure and satisfaction. And this feeling, this positive reinforcement, can strengthen the bonds between individuals, fostering a sense of connection and belonging. The handshake, then, is not just a social custom, but a biological imperative, a way to activate the neural pathways that promote trust and cooperation. It's a way to say without a word, I see you, I acknowledge you, I trust you. And it's this underlying biological mechanism, this complex interplay of hormones and neural pathways that we will explore further. The handshake is not merely a formality, but a window into the very foundations of human connection, a testament to our innate need for trust and belonging. The way the hand holds, the way the skin responds, the way the brain interprets, all of it speaks to a deeper story, a story of evolution, biology, and the enduring power of human interaction. It's a story that begins here, in this grand hall, with a simple clasp of hands, and extends back through centuries of history to the very origins of our species. The quiet hum of the machine is the first thing you notice, a low thrum that seems to vibrate not just in the room, but within the bones of your own hand. The light here is muted, filtered through layers of shielding and glass, a soft lavender glow that paints the contours of the lab in gentle washes. A technician adjusts a sensor, her movements precise and deliberate, and the screen flickers to life, a constellation of activity blooming across its surface. It's a map of sorts, not of continents or cities, but of the shifting currents within the brain, tracing the pathways of connection as they respond to something as simple, as profoundly human as a touch. We spoke last time of the handshake as a gesture, a ritual born from ancient need and tempered by centuries of custom. But a gesture, however meaningful, is only the surface. Beneath the clasp, beneath the polite exchange of pressure, lies a cascade of biological events, a silent conversation unfolding at the level of molecules and neurons. This is where we find the true mechanics of trust, not in the intention behind the greeting, but in the very physical act of reaching out, of meeting another hand, of acknowledging another presence. The network, of course, is the key. Not simply the network of social bonds, the web of relationships that hold a community together, but the network within the skull, the intricate lattice of connections that allows us to perceive, to understand, to feel. And as it happens, there is a system, a rather unassuming one, called trust, built to map another network entirely. It began, quite pragmatically, as a computer system used by Network Rail in Great Britain, tracking the progress of trains and the causes of delays. A comparison of planned movements against actual ones, a meticulous accounting of disruptions and their origins. It seems a world away from the warmth of a human connection, yet the principle is the same: observing a system, identifying deviations from the expected, and seeking to understand the reasons for those deviations. The data from Trust, surprisingly, is publicly available, a testament to the idea that even the most mundane systems can yield valuable insights. But the network we are concerned with now is far more complex, far less predictable. It begins, fundamentally, with the skin. The hand, with its incredible density of nerve endings, is a remarkably sensitive instrument, capable of detecting subtle variations in pressure, texture, and temperature. Each touch, each nuance of contact, sends a flood of signals racing toward the brain, triggering a complex interplay of neural activity. It's a process that begins long before conscious awareness, a pre-verbal assessment of safety and intent. The receptors in your skin aren't simply registering a hand, they're registering the quality of the hand, the firmness of the grip, the warmth of the skin, the subtle micro movements that betray emotional state. And this is where the hormone oxytocin enters the picture. A peptide hormone produced in the hypothalamus and released by the posterior pituitary, it's often referred to as the love hormone or the bonding hormone. But that's a simplification, of course. Oxytocin is far more than just a facilitator of romantic love. It plays a crucial role in a wide range of social behaviors, from childbirth and lactation to the formation of parent-child bonds. It's a signal, a chemical messenger that reinforces positive social interactions, that promotes feelings of trust, empathy, and cooperation. The release of oxytocin isn't automatic, however. It's triggered by specific stimuli, by experiences that signal safety and connection. And the handshake, it turns out, is a remarkably effective trigger. The physical touch, the sustained contact, the mutual acknowledgement of presence, all of these contribute to the release of oxytocin in the brain. It's a subtle shift, a delicate balance of neurochemicals, but it has profound effects. Oxytocin reduces activity in the amygdala, the part of the brain associated with fear and anxiety, and increases activity in the reward centers, creating a sense of pleasure and well-being. It's a biological reward for social connection, a reinforcement of the behavior that promotes cooperation and trust. Consider for a moment the work of researchers studying the effects of oxytocin on social bonding. They've observed in a variety of species that physical touch, grooming, cuddling, even simple proximity, leads to increased levels of oxytocin and a corresponding increase in social cohesion. In prairie voles, for example, a species known for its monogamous relationships, oxytocin plays a critical role in the formation of pair bonds. Blocking oxytocin receptors disrupts the bonding process, while administering oxytocin promotes it. The implications for understanding human relationships are profound. The process unfolds in stages, a cascade of events that begins with the initial contact and continues long after the hands have parted. The sensory information from the skin travels to the somatosensory cortex, where it's processed and integrated with other sensory information. From there, it's relayed to the amygdala, where it's assessed for potential threats. If the amygdala doesn't detect any danger, the signal is passed on to the hypothalamus, triggering the release of oxytocin. The oxytocin then travels to various regions of the brain, including the reward centers, the prefrontal cortex, and the social brain, modulating activity and promoting feelings of trust and connection. The prefrontal cortex, in particular, plays a crucial role in evaluating social cues and making decisions about trust. It's the part of the brain responsible for higher-level cognitive functions, such as planning, reasoning, and judgment. Oxytocin enhances the activity of the prefrontal cortex, allowing us to better assess the intentions of others and make more informed decisions about whether or not to trust them. It's as if oxytocin clears the fog of uncertainty, allowing us to see more clearly the potential risks and rewards of social interaction. This isn't a passive process, of course. It's a dynamic interplay of neural activity, a constant feedback loop between the brain and the body. The release of oxytocin isn't simply a response to physical touch. It's also influenced by our expectations, our past experiences, and our cultural context. A handshake in one culture may carry different connotations than in another. A firm grip may be seen as a sign of confidence and trustworthiness, while a weak grip may be seen as a sign of insecurity or disrespect. Even the subtle variations in pressure and timing can convey information about emotional state. A prolonged grip may signal intimacy and connection, while a brief grip may signal formality or distance. The brain is constantly interpreting these subtle cues, adjusting its response accordingly. It's a remarkable feat of neural computation, a testament to the complexity of the human brain. And it's not just about the handshake itself, it's about the context in which it occurs, the surrounding environment, the social dynamics at play. A handshake in a formal setting such as a business meeting may carry different weight than a handshake in a casual setting, such as a friendly greeting. The brain is constantly integrating all of these factors, creating a nuanced and complex assessment of trust. Consider the implications of this for understanding human bonding. Bonding, at its core, is about developing a close interpersonal relationship between two or more people, characterized by emotions such as affection and trust. It can occur between family members, friends, groups, or individuals who spend time together. Male bonding, for example, often involves shared activities and a sense of camaraderie, while female bonding often involves close personal relationships and emotional support. Cross-sex friendships, too, rely on trust and mutual respect. But all of these forms of bonding share a common foundation: the release of oxytocin and the activation of the brain's reward centers. It's a biological imperative, a fundamental need for social connection that drives us to seek out relationships and form bonds with others. And the handshake, in its own small way, plays a role in this process, a silent gesture that triggers a cascade of events that promotes trust and cooperation. The image on the screen shifts, a new pattern of activity blooming across its surface. The technician makes a slight adjustment, fine-tuning the sensors. The hum of the machine remains constant, a gentle thrum that seems to vibrate within the bones of your hand. The data continues to flow, a silent conversation unfolding at the level of molecules and neurons, revealing the true mechanics of trust. The process, we are beginning to understand, is far more intricate, far more subtle than we ever imagined. It's a biological imperative, a fundamental need for connection that drives us to reach out, to meet another hand, to acknowledge another presence. And the implications of this understanding are profound, offering new insights into the nature of human relationships and the foundations of social cooperation. The brain, it seems, is always searching for patterns, always seeking to predict and understand the behavior of others. And the handshake, in its simplicity, provides a wealth of information, a subtle signal that triggers a cascade of events that promotes trust and connection. It's a testament to the power of nonverbal communication, a silent language that speaks volumes about our intentions and emotions. And the more we understand the mechanics of this process, the better equipped we will be to navigate the complexities of the social world, to build stronger relationships, and to foster a more cooperative and compassionate society. The initial assessment, the subtle release of hormones, the engagement of the prefrontal cortex, these are not merely biological events, they are the foundations of trust, the building blocks of human connection. The light in the cave shifts, not with sun or moon, but with the flickering of resinous smoke from a small fire. It dances on the damp stone, on the rough-hewn figures barely visible in the deeper recesses, and on the hands, your hands perhaps, or the hands of someone very like you, reaching out in a gesture that feels ancient even before it is understood. The air is cool, carries the scent of earth and something else, something faintly metallic, the ghost of blood or perhaps just the minerals in the rock itself. It's a stillness that isn't empty, but full of waiting, of potential. We spoke last time of the cascade, the flurry of signals that bloom beneath the skin when palms meet, the quickening of trust. But that cascade, that bloom, didn't arrive fully formed. It wasn't a gift from some distant ancestor, perfectly calibrated for social harmony. It arose slowly, over immense stretches of time, through a process of refinement, of selection, of trial and error. And to understand that process, to trace the faint echoes of its origins, we must go back further than the laboratories, further than the conscious recognition of a need for connection, back to a time when simply surviving was a full-time occupation. The story of the handshake, then, isn't just the story of a gesture. It's the story of how we learn to read each other, to predict each other's actions, to build a shared reality in a world that offered no guarantees. It is the story of how cooperation itself became possible, and with it the possibility of something more than mere existence. The framework for understanding this unfolding is, of course, evolution, a word that carries so much weight now, so much expectation of progress, of improvement. But at its heart, evolution is a remarkably simple idea. A population of beings, each slightly different from the others, faces a world that presents a constant set of challenges. Those beings that are better suited to those challenges are more likely to survive, to reproduce, to pass on their traits to the next generation. And over time, this process, this slow, relentless filtering, shapes the very fabric of life. 4 mechanisms drive this shaping: natural selection, mutation, genetic drift, and gene flow. Mutation provides the raw material, the random variations that introduce novelty into the population. Genetic drift is the chance fluctuations in gene frequencies, the unpredictable eddies in the stream of inheritance. Gene flow is the exchange of genes between populations, the blurring of boundaries. But it is natural selection that provides the direction, the pressure that favors certain traits over others. It was observed independently by Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace, these 2 keen observers of the natural world, each arriving at the same conclusion through their own journeys and observations. Darwin, sailing around the globe on the Beagle, meticulously documenting the diversity of life. Wallace, exploring the rainforests of the Amazon and the islands of the Malay archipelago, collecting specimens and pondering the patterns he found. Both realized that the organisms best adapted to their environments were the ones that thrived, the ones that left behind the most offspring. But understanding that happened, that some traits are favored over others, is only the first step. The real challenge lies in understanding how those traits are inherited, how they are passed down from one generation to the next. And that's where Gregor Mendel comes in, with his careful experiments on pea plants, patiently tracking the inheritance of different characteristics. He discovered the laws of inheritance, the principles that govern the transmission of traits from parents to offspring. For decades, though, these laws remained largely unnoticed, overshadowed by the prevailing theories of blending inheritance, the idea that traits simply mix together in each generation. It wasn't until the early 20th century that Mendel's work was rediscovered and its significance fully appreciated. And it was then, with the combination of Mendelian genetics and Darwinian natural selection, that the modern synthesis of evolution began to take shape. A figure central to this synthesis was Ronald Fisher, a brilliant mathematician who brought the rigor of quantitative analysis to the study of evolution. He showed how natural selection could act on genetic variation, how it could shape the distribution of traits within a population. He developed statistical methods for analyzing genetic data, providing a powerful new tool for understanding the process of evolution. He also contributed to the revival of Darwinism, rescuing it from the criticisms of those who questioned its scientific validity. Richard Dawkins, decades later, would call Fisher the greatest of Darwin's successors. But let's return to the cave, to those hands reaching out. What was being selected for here? What advantage could possibly be conferred by a gesture like a handshake? The answer, it seems, lies in the development of human bonding, the formation of close interpersonal relationships. Human bonding isn't simply a matter of liking someone. It's a much deeper process, involving mutual, interactive behaviors, a shared history, a sense of emotional connection. It nurtures social connection, providing a sense of belonging, of security, of support. And it is characterized by emotions like affection, trust, and empathy. Male bonding, for example, often involves shared activities, a sense of camaraderie, a willingness to cooperate in the face of challenges. Female bonding, on the other hand, tends to be more focused on emotional intimacy, on shared confidences, on mutual support. But both forms of bonding serve the same fundamental purpose: to strengthen social ties, to increase the chances of survival and reproduction. And within these bonds, trust plays a crucial role. Trust allows us to cooperate with others, to share resources, to defend each other against threats. It reduces anxiety, increases feelings of safety, and promotes a sense of well-being. But trust isn't simply a matter of believing that someone will behave in a certain way. It's a complex process involving a whole host of cognitive and emotional factors. We spoke last time of how the handshake triggers a cascade of neural and hormonal responses, including the release of oxytocin. But oxytocin isn't the whole story. It's simply one piece of a much larger puzzle. The handshake itself is a signal, a communication of intent, a demonstration of vulnerability. By offering an open palm, by allowing someone to touch your hand, you are signaling that you are not a threat. You are signaling that you are willing to cooperate. But this signal isn't foolproof. It can be faked, manipulated, misinterpreted. And that's where the complexities of trust come into play. Trust isn't simply a matter of reading signals. It's a matter of assessing risk, of weighing potential benefits against potential costs. It's a matter of taking a leap of faith, of believing that someone will behave in a way that is consistent with your expectations. And that leap of faith, that willingness to take a risk, is deeply rooted in our evolutionary history. Our ancestors lived in small, tightly knit groups where cooperation was essential for survival. Those who were able to form strong bonds, to build trust with others, were more likely to thrive, to reproduce, to pass on their traits to the next generation. But what about the moments when trust is betrayed? What about the moments when someone violates our expectations, when someone takes advantage of our vulnerability? These moments are also deeply rooted in our evolutionary history. Our ancestors also faced the threat of deception, of exploitation, of betrayal. Those who were able to detect these threats to avoid being taken advantage of were also more likely to survive, to reproduce, to pass on their traits to the next generation. The handshake, then, is a product of this ongoing tension, this constant interplay between cooperation and competition, between trust and betrayal. It is a gesture that embodies both the promise of connection and the risk of vulnerability. And perhaps that's why it feels so ancient, so deeply ingrained in our very being. It's a gesture that speaks to something fundamental about our nature, about our need for connection, about our capacity for both trust and suspicion. But if the handshake is so deeply rooted in our evolutionary history, why does it take so many forms? Why does it vary so much from culture to culture? Why does it sometimes feel genuine and sometimes feel forced? The answer, it seems, lies in the fact that evolution isn't a perfect process. It's a messy, unpredictable process, shaped by a whole host of factors, including environmental conditions, cultural norms, and individual preferences. And the handshake, like any other human behavior, is subject to these influences. There is a limit to how easily we can trace these origins, a point where the tidy narrative of selection breaks down. We can observe the neural and hormonal responses, we can analyze the genetic data, but we can never fully reconstruct the conditions that gave rise to this gesture. The cave itself holds its secrets, the damp stone silent witness to events that unfolded long before the dawn of recorded history. What this means is that the handshake is not a fixed, immutable artifact of our evolutionary past. It is a dynamic, evolving behavior, constantly adapting to the changing needs of our social environment. It is a gesture that embodies both the promise of connection and the risk of vulnerability, a testament to the complexity of human interaction. And it is a gesture that continues to shape our lives, even in a world that seems increasingly disconnected and fragmented. The fire crackles, sending sparks dancing into the darkness, and the hands, your hands, reach out once more, seeking a connection that transcends time and circumstance. The air is still, expectant, waiting for the touch that will begin the silent conversation anew. The light in the hall has softened further, a late afternoon gold settling on the rows of empty seats. It feels like the end of something, not a finality exactly, but a slowing. Daché Keltner often used this space to demonstrate what he called the handshake test, a deceptively simple exercise designed to measure the subtle currents of trust that flow between people. It wasn't about grand declarations or overt signals. It was about the small, almost imperceptible adjustments we make when we believe someone is acting in good faith. And to understand those adjustments, to truly see them, he needed to first show how easily we could be misled, how readily we construct a narrative of trustworthiness, even when the signals are ambiguous. He would begin by inviting 2 volunteers to the front of the room, carefully chosen for their lack of prior acquaintance. The initial handshake, he'd explain, was a calibration, a neutral point from which to observe any deviation. It wasn't the firmness of the grip that mattered, not initially. It was the micro-expressions, the subtle shifts in posture, the almost instantaneous mirroring of each other's movements. He was looking for something beyond politeness, something deeper than social convention. He was looking for the unconscious choreography of connection, the almost invisible language of shared intention. And it was here, in the delicate interplay of these non-verbal cues, that the test began to reveal its power. The core of the handshake test wasn't the handshake itself, but what came after. Keltner would introduce a small element of risk, a hypothetical scenario involving a small sum of money. One volunteer, the truster, would be given a modest amount and asked to decide how much to share with the other volunteer, the trustee. The trustee, in turn, would be given the opportunity to return a portion of the money or keep it for themselves. The expectation, of course, was that a trustworthy trustee would reciprocate the trust, returning a fair share. But Keltner wasn't interested in the outcome, not exactly. He was interested in the process of decision-making, the subtle signals that revealed the trustee's true intentions. And that process, he discovered, could be measured with remarkable precision. He began to focus on the subtle changes in facial muscle contractions, the minute fluctuations in skin conductance, the almost imperceptible shifts in heart rate variability. He wasn't looking for lies, for conscious deception. He was looking for the unconscious leakage of emotion, the physiological markers of trust and betrayal. To capture these fleeting signals, he turned to a technology that had been quietly evolving for decades, the electromyogram, or EMG. The EMG works by detecting the electrical activity produced by skeletal muscles. Tiny electrodes, carefully placed on the face and neck, measure the subtle contractions that accompany even the slightest expression. These contractions, invisible to the naked eye, are amplified and recorded, creating a detailed map of facial activity. It's a painstaking process, requiring meticulous calibration and careful control of extraneous variables. The room must be quiet, the lighting consistent, the volunteers relaxed and comfortable. And the data, once collected, must be analyzed with sophisticated algorithms capable of discerning patterns that would be lost to human observation. Imagine the setup. The volunteer sits perfectly still, a network of fine wires tracing the contours of their face. A baseline reading is established, a neutral state from which to measure any subsequent deviation. Then the scenario is introduced, the hypothetical exchange of money, the opportunity to betray or reciprocate trust. As the trustee considers their options, a flurry of electrical activity begins to ripple across their face. The zygomatic major muscle responsible for smiling may contract slightly, even if the smile doesn't reach the lips. The corrugator supercilii muscle, responsible for frowning, may tense, betraying a flicker of hesitation or doubt. The orbicularis oculi muscle, surrounding the eyes, may tighten, revealing a subtle hint of empathy or concern. These contractions, measured in microseconds, are then translated into a visual representation, a complex waveform that reveals the underlying emotional state. Keltner discovered that trustworthy individuals tended to exhibit a distinct pattern of facial activity, characterized by genuine Duchenne smiles, those that engage the muscles around the eyes as well as the mouth, and a relatively symmetrical activation of the face. Untrustworthy individuals, on the other hand, tended to exhibit more asymmetrical patterns, characterized by forced smiles and a lack of genuine emotional engagement. The real innovation wasn't the EMG itself, but how Keltner used it. He wasn't simply looking for signs of deception, he was looking for signs of connection. He realized that trust wasn't a static trait, but a dynamic process, constantly being negotiated and renegotiated through subtle non-verbal cues, and the handshake, he discovered, was a particularly potent catalyst for this process. It was a moment of physical contact, a brief but intense exchange of information that triggered a cascade of physiological and emotional responses. To understand why the handshake was so effective, Keltner turned to the work being done on a small, unassuming hormone called oxytocin. Discovered in the early 20th century, oxytocin had long been known for its role in childbirth and lactation, but its broader role in social bonding and trust was only beginning to be understood. Researchers had discovered that oxytocin receptors were densely concentrated in brain regions associated with empathy, social cognition, and reward, and crucially they had found that administering oxytocin could significantly enhance trust and cooperation in both humans and animals. The process of isolating oxytocin itself is a story of relentless purification, a slow and painstaking separation of a single molecule from a complex biological matrix. It begins with the pituitary gland, a tiny structure at the base of the brain that serves as the primary source of the hormone. The glands are carefully collected, homogenized, and subjected to a series of chromatographic separations, exploiting subtle differences in molecular size and charge. Each separation yields a slightly purer fraction, gradually isolating the target molecule from the thousands of other proteins and peptides present in the original sample. Imagine the lab bench, bathed in the cool fluorescent light. A technician carefully monitors the progress of the separation, adjusting the flow rate and solvent composition with meticulous precision. The fractions are collected in a series of small tubes, each one representing a step closer to the desired purity. As the separation progresses, the volume of each fraction decreases, while the concentration of oxytocin increases. The process is repeated again and again until a single tube contains a sample that is almost entirely free of contaminants. Once isolated, oxytocin can be analyzed using a variety of techniques, including mass spectrometry and high-performance liquid chromatography. These techniques allow researchers to identify the hormone with absolute certainty and to quantify its concentration with remarkable precision. And it was through these painstaking analyses that the hormone's remarkable properties began to be revealed. It wasn't simply a chemical messenger, but a powerful modulator of social behavior, capable of influencing everything from maternal bonding to romantic attachment. Keltner, drawing on this research, proposed that the handshake served as a natural trigger for oxytocin release. The physical contact, the subtle pressure, the brief but intense exchange of information, all of these factors stimulated the release of oxytocin in the brain, fostering a sense of trust and connection. And it was this surge of oxytocin, he believed, that explained the remarkable power of the handshake to facilitate social bonding. The test wasn't simply a measure of trustworthiness, it was a measure of the physiological response to a gesture of connection. The willingness to share, the subtle mirroring of movements, the genuine Duchenne smile, these were all outward manifestations of an underlying neurochemical process. The hall is almost dark now, the gold light fading to a soft amber. Outside, the sounds of the campus are beginning to quiet, the day settling into evening. The handshake test, Keltner would often say, wasn't about finding the perfect handshake, but about understanding the complex interplay of biology and behavior that underlies all human connection. It was a reminder that trust isn't simply a matter of rational calculation, but a deeply emotional process rooted in our shared evolutionary history, the subtle adjustments, the micro-expressions, the unconscious leakage of emotion. These were the true signals of trust, the language without words that speaks to the deepest parts of our being. And the more we understand these signals, the more effectively we can navigate the complex social world around us, building stronger connections and fostering a more cooperative and compassionate society. The act of reaching out, of offering a hand, remains a testament to our innate capacity for connection, a biological imperative that continues to shape our interactions, even in the most modern of times. The light in the boardroom has softened further, the polished wood of the conference table reflecting a quiet gleam. Outside, the city breathes, a low hum that barely reaches this room, and the air itself seems to settle with the close of the working day. It is a room built for decisions, for the weighing of consequence and the shaping of futures, and tonight it holds a quiet echo of that purpose. We've spoken of the handshake as a test, a fleeting exchange observed with instruments and charts, a window into the subtle language of trust. But it is also, in this space, something more immediate, something older, a ritual enacted across generations, a gesture that binds intentions and seals agreements. To understand this enduring quality, we must look beyond the immediate release of oxytocin, beyond the involuntary tightening of muscles that Daché Keltner's electromyogram so precisely captured, and consider the deeper currents that flow beneath the surface. The handshake as a practice is not simply a response to a neurochemical signal, but a deeply embedded habit, a behavior sculpted by forces that predate the boardroom, that reach back into the earliest days of social cooperation. It is a habit born of uncertainty, of the need to signal intent, to demonstrate a willingness to engage without immediate threat. Consider for a moment the problem of first contact, not the grand imagined encounter with an alien species, but the everyday crucial meeting of two individuals who have no prior history, no shared understanding. How does one convey peaceful intention? How does one establish a baseline of trust before the exchange of information, before the negotiation of terms? The open palm, the offering of the hand, is a gesture that speaks to this fundamental need. It is a visible relinquishing of power, a demonstration that one is not concealing a weapon, that one is vulnerable, that one is willing to risk. The hand itself, of course, is a remarkable instrument, a complex articulation of bone, muscle, and nerve, capable of both incredible force and exquisite sensitivity. It is the tool with which we build, with which we create, with which we interact with the world. And it is also, crucially, the tool with which we touch. The very act of touching another human being activates a cascade of neural pathways, a complex interplay of sensory information that bypasses conscious thought and speaks directly to the limbic system, the ancient core of the brain responsible for emotion and memory. This is not simply a matter of physical contact. It is a matter of shared biology, of the recognition of another being as a fellow inhabitant of this world. But the handshake is not merely a display of vulnerability, a passive offering of trust. It is also an active assessment, a subtle probing of another's intentions. The firmness of the grip, the duration of the contact, the pressure exerted, all convey information, often unconsciously. The handshake, in this sense, is a reciprocal exchange, a silent conversation conducted through the language of pressure and resistance. It is a test not of emotional sincerity, but of physical control, of the willingness to engage in a dynamic interplay of force and accommodation. This dynamic, this subtle dance of pressure and resistance, may have its roots in the earliest forms of primate social interaction. Charles Darwin, in his meticulous observations of the natural world, noted the importance of dominance hierarchies within primate groups. He observed that individuals often established their position within the hierarchy through physical displays of strength and aggression, through gestures of intimidation and submission. While the handshake is not a direct analogue of these displays, it shares a similar underlying principle: the assessment of relative power and the establishment of a social order. Darwin, born in 1809 and passing away in 1882, dedicated his life to understanding the subtle nuances of animal behavior, and his work laid the foundation for much of our understanding of social cooperation and competition. And it is here in the work of Alfred Russel Wallace that the picture becomes even more nuanced. Wallace, an English naturalist who independently conceived the theory of evolution through natural selection, spent years exploring the Amazon River basin and the Malay archipelago, meticulously documenting the flora and fauna of these remote regions. He published a paper alongside Darwin's writings in 1858, outlining his own observations on the mechanisms of evolution. Wallace identified what is now known as the Wallace Line, a biogeographical boundary that separates the Indonesian archipelago into western and eastern portions, revealing distinct patterns of species distribution. But his observations extended beyond the natural world, encompassing the complexities of human social interaction. Wallace noted that the expression of emotion, the subtle cues of trust and deception, varied significantly across different cultures, suggesting that these behaviors were not simply innate, but were shaped by environmental and social factors. This is a crucial point. The handshake, as a practice, is not universal. While variations of hand-grasping rituals exist in many cultures, the specific form of the handshake we recognize today is a relatively recent invention, a product of specific historical and social circumstances. It emerged, it is believed, as a gesture of peaceful intent among medieval knights, a demonstration that one was not concealing a weapon in one's sleeve. The act of showing an empty hand, of extending it in a visible and vulnerable manner, signaled a willingness to engage in fair combat, to abide by a common set of rules. The development of human bonding, the process of forming close interpersonal relationships, is characterized by emotions such as affection and trust, and the handshake, as a ritualized exchange, plays a crucial role in this process. It is a way of establishing a shared context, of creating a sense of connection and mutual understanding. It is a way of signaling a willingness to cooperate, to share resources, to work towards common goals, and it is a way of reinforcing existing bonds, of reaffirming a commitment to a shared future. The handshake, however, is not a foolproof indicator of trust. As Keltner's research demonstrated, it is possible to fake sincerity, to manipulate the subtle cues of emotional engagement. But even in these cases, the act of attempting to deceive triggers physiological responses that can be detected by careful observation. The body, it seems, is not always willing to cooperate with the conscious mind. The involuntary tightening of muscles, the subtle shifts in facial expression, all betray the underlying tension, the effort to maintain a false facade. And this, perhaps, is the enduring power of the handshake. It is not a guarantee of trust, but a test of its limits. It is a way of probing another's intentions, of assessing their willingness to engage in a genuine exchange. It is a way of creating a shared context, of establishing a baseline of trust before the more complex negotiations begin. It is a way of reminding ourselves that human interaction is inherently risky, that trust is not simply given, but must be earned, and that even the most subtle gestures can reveal a wealth of information. The boardroom is quiet now, the city's hum a distant murmur. The polished wood reflects the fading light, and the air seems to hold a sense of stillness. The handshake, as a practice, continues to evolve, adapting to new social circumstances, incorporating new cues and signals. But its underlying principle remains the same: the assessment of intent, the demonstration of vulnerability, the establishment of a shared context. It is a ritual that speaks to our deepest needs, to our fundamental desire for connection and cooperation. It is a testament to the enduring power of nonverbal communication, to the subtle language of trust that binds us together. And as you settle into the quiet of the evening, as the day's concerns begin to fade, perhaps you might reflect on the last handshake you offered or received. What information was exchanged? What intentions were conveyed? What subtle cues did you pick up on, consciously or unconsciously? It is a small gesture, a fleeting moment in time, but it is a gesture that speaks to the very heart of what it means to be human, to engage in the complex and often uncertain dance of social interaction. The pressure of a hand, the warmth of a palm, the subtle shift in weight, these are the quiet signals that build the foundations of trust, that shape the contours of our relationships, and that remind us that even in a world of increasing complexity, the most fundamental connections are often forged through the simplest of gestures. The hand remembers even when the mind forgets, and the enduring echo of that connection continues to resonate long after the grasp has been released. The hand, in its stillness, holds the promise of future encounters, the potential for renewed trust, and the quiet hope of shared understanding. The image of King Shalmaneser III's hand clasping Marduk Zakir-Shumi Thui's remains in the mind. That gesture, carved in stone, marked a moment of trust across time. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone, flows through our bodies in quiet moments of touch. The trust system, once a computer network, now mirrors the quiet work of the brain. These threads of connection, whether ancient or modern, weave through history. The up and down motion of a handshake, a silent promise, the weight of a hand in another's, the pause between touch and release, the space where trust begins, a moment held, then let go, the hand rests, the stone grows still, the brain slows, the world holds its breath, then the silence.